Hello everyone. So today we have Dr. Gauri Divan with all of us. Let me have some introduction first. So Dr. Gauri Divan is the director of the Child Development Group in the non-for-profit organization Sangath with its center in Goa and hubs across India. Sangath's work is focused on creating innovations that use the task-sharing approach with non-specialist workers who then provide interventions across the life course. As a pediatrician, Dr. Gauri works in the areas of early child development, developmental disabilities with a focus on autism, and adolescent health. She leads a team that is designing ways in using technology both to train as well as deliver intervention for young children in the community. Through the public health research and innovations that she is involved in, she hopes to nudge communities to be more inclusive so as to support every child reach their true potential. To be very honest, it is very less of an introduction to the work of Sangath and the work Dr. Gauri has been doing, but this is the crux of their work. And with this introduction, I would like to welcome her once again to this interview. And I would like to proceed with the questions that we are having today for her. So, Dr. Gauri, you are leading work in one of the you're leading the work in early child development in one of the leading public health research organizations. So can you please tell us how Sangath started and how its work has developed?
Sure. So Sonali, first of all, thank you for interviewing me for World Autism Awareness Day and also for the month of April, where we really want to showcase the lives of people with autism with a view to really improving their care and coverage of health. So in terms of Sangath, Sangath started off as a not-for-profit in Goa. Now it's our 25th year. We've just entered our 25th year, so it's a year of big celebrations for us. And we started off as a child development center. So we really, we were providing services like many child development centers across India and across the world. It was innovative at that time because child development, particularly supporting children with neurodevelopmental disorders, was not that common. And it was really the first in the not-for-profit sector in Goa for sure. What happened is one of the things we started noticing as we started providing services for families was that firstly, the story of families in the context of developmental disorder is complex. So the child, you just cannot treat the child. The child lives within the context of a family. The family has multiple needs and requirements. And one of the things we saw very clearly was when we were providing center-based services, that families would come initially very often, and then they would just drop off. Because as you know, developmental disorders don't disappear overnight. They don't disappear after 2 to 3 sessions. Most developmental disorders require really long-term treatments and therapies. And I think families, when we started talking to them, found this very difficult to engage with. And so we decided that let's expand in 2 ways. One is across the life course. So let's support the family that lives around children with autism. So we started working across the life course with young people, with adults, with parents. And the second thing we started thinking about is how do we provide services for families where families live? So how do we provide community-based services? And really the only way to provide community-based services in the context of India, where we absolutely don't have specialists. We have a real lack of trained specialists across the board. So when we think of, we have fewer doctors than we need, we have fewer surgeons than we need. When we think of child development support, so when we think about developmental pediatricians, child psychiatrists, speech and language therapists, they're almost non-existent in the context of 1.3 billion people. And so one of the things we started thinking about doing this with adult mental health was looking at the task sharing approach. So how do we look at a non-specialist, a frontline worker, how do we hand over certain treatments that they can then give to families where families live, and where families really live is in their homes and in the communities. So this task sharing approach is something that we've really embraced. And the other aspect of the work that we do is really thinking about research. So how do we not just give treatments and think they are the best because we give them, but how do we evaluate these treatments? How do we design these treatments? So actually, when we are spending money, particularly public health money and public sector money, we are spending it on treatments we know that work. So that's really what Sangath has been doing and how we've evolved from a child development center into a really world-class public health research institute.
Thank you, Gauri, for explaining this journey to us. And it really sounds like a lot of work with a lot of complexities that the organization and team must have gone through. And then now we see that, as you said, world-class organization who is leading research work. So I would like to ask my second question that when you started this research work, so were there any challenges that you faced during researching autism?
Of course, research in India is complicated. I think the first complication is there is a knowledge imbalance. So you as a specialist or you as a researcher, you have much more knowledge than your community most of the time, particularly, and I suspect mental health research. And what I mean by that is that when you go and tell families we want to do research with you, first of all, they don't have a language for this. They don't understand what you want to do. And so I think the first real complexity is getting the community to understand what is it that you want to do. The second thing around research, and I think a big barrier, is the suspicion because of the lack of knowledge. There is also suspicion around research. So what is it that you want to do? Are you only going to take from us? So that's another, I think, complexity. I think the third aspect of research, and at least what we find in Sangath, is where is the money coming from? So there is a huge amount of suspicion about where is the money coming from. Is it Indian money? Is it foreign money? Where do, what does this mean? Now, luckily, we don't do biomedical research. We don't do, most of our research is not biomedical, it's psychosocial. And so that is not such a threat. But it still remains a question, for many times because particularly when we work in autism, we do sometimes want to understand the genetics of autism. So if we want to collect things like blood sample, how are we going to explain this to families so that they don't feel threatened? So that's another barrier. And I think, I would say these are really and I would say the other barriers is we don't have, particularly in the not-for-profit sector, we don't have a career progression track. So we do have academic institutes, of course. We have tertiary institutes, usually medical schools, some public health research institutes, which can support academic tracks. But I think particularly in the not-for-profit sector, this is really a challenge, is that how do you support young researchers to become senior researchers within a not-for-profit track is another very big challenge.
So even I agree that when we enter into the community, even to work, parents or all the members have a lot of questions usually that what is it that you want to do with us? As you said, there is very less knowledge about research. So we would really like to know how you coped with those challenges, or how did you overcome these challenges?
So I think the first thing is that, Sangath as an organization has a established and recognized institutional review board. So this is really very important, is that any research that you do must go through what we call an IRB or an institutional ethics committee, so IEC. They're just different names for the same thing. And this is usually people that are brought together with knowledge of research, but also public civil society members. And the idea is that every single research that we undertake in Sangath, we first of all, of course, think through it very carefully about what we're doing, but it goes through this rigorous process of being evaluated, not only by the Sangath's IRB, but when we are in partnership with other IRBs and other institutions. And what this means is that we have to defend what we're doing very clearly. When we know that our research is going through an IRB, we design it very well. So we answer lots of questions around who our participants are going to be, How are we going to inform participants in very simple language what they will undertake if they sign on board a research program? What is that going to mean in terms of a commitment of time, in terms of resources for them as a family? What will they get? What will they not get? So it's very important, particularly in the work that we do in Sangath. We conduct randomized control trials. So half the population will get the intervention, where half the population will not get the intervention. And that is complicated in a setting like India, where what we call the treatment as usual arm is often nothing. So how do we match that with the ethics of not giving a family any kind of service? So we do adapt our research designs to make sure that all families get some level of support. And I think the other aspect is really to always make sure that families who participate are adequately compensated, so they get some kind of participatory token for their time and effort. More importantly, to take the information back. So we are very careful that we disseminate information back to the community that we have worked with. So really to make sure that all research we do is collaborative, we bring on stakeholders, and we really support them, to understand what we're doing, but to give back to them once we know our results.
This information or this wisdom that you are sharing with us right now, it is very much rare in India, because there are very less organizations who are doing research in mental health. My next question would be that how do you ensure that the voices of families and children that are included in the research that you do?
Really good question, and I kind of touched on it briefly in my last answer. So we really try and make sure that every program we do has either a civil society member as part of an advisory board, or is part of the preparatory formative phase of the work that we do. So for example, let me just give you an example from the work that we've done in autism. So when we did our first intervention trial in Goa, it was a social communication intervention. It was a very novel intervention. We delivered it as a treatment. We delivered it, and we saw some very good results. But part of the intervention process was also interesting, because when we were trying to deliver the social communication intervention, and social communication problems and difficulties are really the core of autism, what we also found is that families were quite preoccupied by other things. So often the child was not sleeping well. The child had toileting problems. The child was very hyperactive, and the family was really quite exhausted. Many times the parent was quite depressed with this, with how overwhelmed they were. So their mood was low. They couldn't engage with the treatment. And so from this, we realized that actually, if we really listen to the families, what they want is not just an intervention for social communication, but they want an intervention that addresses many of their other problems. And so when we designed a whole modular intervention, which is called the Plus component, which now actually supports these kind of problems for families. So I think this is really the way we listen to families, we take their voices on board, and then we expand the intervention to really to address the needs of families on the ground.
This surely sounds complicated, but I can see that efforts of the whole Sangath team has been making sure that we include these voices, and we not only include voices just for the sake of it, but we deliver to give respect to what they are saying or what they would want. So I really think it is a respect to their needs, and it is really inspiring for all of us to see. So my next question is for the people or for the youth who would like to do something in research in public health domain. So what would be advice that you would give someone who would like to have such a career in research public health?
So I think really, it's a very broad question that you're asking me, but so I'm going to give a relatively broad answer. So first of all, I think if you are interested in research, you need to start in your undergraduate work to start identifying organizations that are doing work in areas that you're interested in. I think most organizations encourage internships. So come on board as an intern in any organization. So whether it's child development, disability, mental health, public health, there's a huge number. There's a huge number of organizations working with women's needs, with other public health requirements. So I think identify an organization which is on the ground, which is really doing not only the work, but also some research within it. Then the next step I would suggest is really to think about the areas of research. So initially, you might want to volunteer, intern in multiple organizations, get a wide range of experiences. Through this experience, then decide, okay, this is really the area of research that I'm interested in. Then you identify the organization that requires and meets that need. Then, of course, start looking up their work, read up what they want to do, and then reach out. I think most academics, particularly in the not-for-profit sector, will support young, enthusiastic people. The academic route is much more structured. So in that sense, if you want to work within an academic organization which is already established, there are very clear requirements for how that moves. But in the not-for-profit sector, I think finding areas of research, getting into programs and projects, when you are in an organization, volunteering across programs and projects. So kind of, if you are in an organization like Sangath, we work in addictions research, we work in early child development, we work in neurodevelopmental disorders, adult work. So try and make sure that you're trying to find out, okay, which of these is really interesting for me? What is a good fit for me? I think that's also really very important. I think many early career researchers, we live complicated lives. And I think particularly the last year has shown us how complicated our lives are, that we can say, okay, work from home is fine, but home has its own pressures. So realize your limitations and also your strengths. Work on your strengths, but also try and build up and support your limitations. And I think limitations also come into the fact that you have to at some point learn to say no. So you can say that, okay, this is going to be too much for me. How do I say no? How do I focus on the areas that really excite me? Then I would say that when research projects emerge in the organization that you're linked with, try and volunteer across the board. So do qualitative work, try and learn quantitative methodologies. I think one of the big things that I personally feel we really don't have good skills for in India is writing. Learn how to write, learn how to make reports. This is a really important skill. And I think read a lot of publications, see how people are writing reports and publications, learn from these skills, and learn from reading. I think there's no other way of learning except reading, finding out how somebody has written a report or written a publication, and trying to emulate that in the work that you do. So that's really the advice I would give. I think learning to write is a core aspect of research. And I cannot stress that enough, that if you really want a research career, you must learn not only the theoretical aspects of research, how to do the research in the community, but writing is absolutely essential.
Thank you so much, Gauri, for this answer. I'm sure this is going to help a lot of people out there. And you have given us steps which we can do on our own, and then we can approach someone to check our work or maybe for improvisation. So this is really a good kind of a homework that you have shared with many people. So my next question is, and as we are going towards the end of this interview, that would you like to share any of your best memories working with families with autism?
Okay, there are too many memories. I think, I don't know if it's best memories, but I would say they're memories that remain with you. And I would say the memories that remain are really the ones where, families have just come back with excitement about the work that you have shared with them, or the intervention that you've shared with them, and how that's changed their lives. I would say one of the other memorable learning moments for me in my work has been really that as a researcher, as a clinician, one has this aspiration for a child or a family. And often the family has a very different attitude. And many families, are quite satisfied with where they are. As long as their children are happy, as long as their children are well, are self-caring. And I think that has been a very big learning for me, is that we come to the table or to a clinical room with our aspirations, that this is what I want to do, this is what I think needs to be done. But often families want to step back and say, look, we know that that's all the possibility, but in our family set, we feel this is enough. We feel that we want him to be able to look after himself. We would like him to be safe, and we want him to be happy. And I think that's an important realization, that families have their own requirements. And I think as clinicians and as researchers, we have to really respect that. So I would say that's really the main thing for me, is that how do you match your aspiration and your desire for a family to be reaching out and doing the best they can, and the family's expectations and the family's requirement just to be happy in where they are. And I think that's really a very important balance. And we all need to get that, and we all need to calibrate our own aspirations and ambitions for individual families to make sure that their voices are heard and that we respect those voices.
Yes, so this is a good message for, I think, World Autism Awareness Day. Many professionals will be having a lot of activities, and many professionals will be building new activities for the coming year. And this message will surely help them to design their work in whatever way they want to work with children with autism and the family. So I would really like to thank you, Gauri, for your time, because I know you are very busy with a lot of projects, and still you have thought of sharing this time with us. So thank you so much, and all the best for your work.
Yeah, always a pleasure, and all the best to you too.